Hello, my name is Nicholas Gibson, and today I will be your guide taking you to 1960s America, and in particular, Louisville, Kentucky. The 1960s saw the rise of several new left movements, the biggest of which was the Civil Rights Movement. During the decade, protests against segregation, busing practices, housing, and police brutality were common in most major cities. The notion of separate but equal was in the process of being challenged and torn down nationwide, as cities such as Baltimore and Washington, D.C. became hotspots of not just protests, but more importantly, racially charged violence. A pillar of the black community that led the charge against violence was Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. His life inspires many to this day, but his death served as the catalyst for already growing violent action, which wouldn't just be limited to major cities like Baltimore. The so-called city under a veil, Louisville, Kentucky, would feel deep lasting effects as well. Even before King's death in 1968, Louisville had started to see factors arising that would lead eventually to the boiling point, the riot of 1968. The site of the riot, the Parkland neighborhood, is of great importance, as this urban neighborhood became an example of the crumbling of black inner-city communities during the era and to this day. The neighborhood was incorporated in the late 19th century and was hit by early disaster and saw many rebuilding efforts. The once predominantly rich white neighborhood was transformed over time and would see the rise of a business district which was owned in part by whites and blacks. White flight and the advancement of technology and business led to African Americans moving into the area, creating their own housing and businesses, as whites moved to the suburbs. Factors such as poverty, despair, discrimination, and ignorance began to rise during the Civil Rights era. And on May 27, 1968, long-standing factors would combine with a protest to create a perfect storm. In the Parkland neighborhood, a protest took place around the area of 28th Street in Virginia and Dumonnell. The protest grew out of an excessive force charge against a white police officer who was to be reinstated to the police force after a hearing. Hundreds of people gathered in the middle of an intersection and listened to speeches given from the roof of a car. Community organizers such as James Cortez were in attendance and gave speeches which drew the crowd into an excited state. A rumor had also been spread that the plane carrying one of the speakers, Stokely Carmichael, was being purposefully delayed to keep him out of Louisville. Once police arrived and attempted to help people leave the area, stories began to differ on cause. Some say bottle throwing began the event. Others say that it was police overreaction. What is true is small groups began to spread throughout the area and began to break windows, tear up sidewalks, loot stores, and burn cars. This caused massive damage to the neighborhood and all of the businesses and housing within, and resulted in the National Guard being called out to the city, lasting a full week. In the aftermath, only devastation and despair remained. The once bustling business district of Parkland was crippled beyond repair. Looting, vandalism, and arson had wrecked the neighborhood. Not only that, but other factors already occurring, such as white flight, helped lead to the downfall of the Parkland business district. National Guard troops occupying the area left a stigma on the neighborhood which couldn't be removed. The owner of Mr. J's Styles put it in a certain way. No one wants to come down here whether they're white or black. The whole event has left a horrible stigma. People no longer felt comfortable living and shopping in the same place that they had guns pointed at them. Longtime businesses such as Owen's Funeral Home, which opened in 1930, would close its doors in 1970 and relocate. These businesses relocated to areas such as Broadway, which were seen as nicer and more business-friendly. The factors of poverty, despair, discrimination, and ignorance led to the downfall of the Parkland business district. The riot was just the last straw, causing mass exodus and an influx of poor African Americans into the community. The neighborhood to this day remains in poverty and despair, no doubt from the traumatizing riot of 1968, which may be the darkest day in Louisville's history.